It's a real honor to have Dr. Ramanathan returning to NACW to update all of us on some of the latest in science. And before I turn it over to Dr. Ramanathan, I just wanted to touch base on some of his numerous accomplishments. I don't have 6 hours to list them all here, but let me just hit a few highlights. And it begins actually in 1975, where he discovered that the greenhouse effect related to the use of CFCs and other heat-trapping pollutants was serious and needed to be monitored. He's done a lot of work on the various super pollutants, not only CFCs, but also methane, ozone, black carbon. He served as a science advisor for Pope Francis's Holy See delegation to the 2015 UN summit in Paris, and also to the 2016 COP in Marrakesh. He's advised Governor Brown on climate action and was the founding chair of the University of California's Bending the Curve Climate Solutions Education Protocol. As I said, his accomplishments are numerous. Right now he's focusing on, frankly, somewhat shifting from the climate crisis to the reality of the need for climate resilience, and has most recently published a book in that space. And he's now co-organizing a summit of mayors and governors at the Vatican in May of this year to produce a planetary climate resilience protocol. Without further ado, it's my delight to introduce the distinguished Professor Emeritus of Climate Sustainability from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Dr. Ramanathan. Dr. Ramanathan, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, very good. Thanks for the generous introduction. Let me just try to share my screen. I hope you can all see this. I reviewed your program last 2-3 days. I'm honestly really super impressed. And you all are embarking or have embarked on a major journey to protect the people on the planet. I call that bending the curve. What you're trying to do is bend the emissions curve so that the warming curve will bend downwards. And just superb, the attempts you're making, but unfortunately the warming is trending rapidly upwards. So what that means is we need a new approach to bounce back from the crises, stronger, healthier, and wealthier. Some don't like the word bouncing back, then you can replace that with rebound from the crisis. So that is what I'm going to talk about today, to this new approach several of us are working on. I call this the climate resilience approach. And the subtitle is basically we have to figure out how to survive and thrive after we solve the crisis. In fact, my talk today, essentially most of the contents today just appeared an hour ago in The Hill as an op-ed. And the title is A Forward-Thinking Strategy to Survive and Thrive Through Climate Change. So let me just give you a 30 seconds lecture on the entire climate change issue problem. So we know the primary heat-trapping pollutant is carbon dioxide. Anytime you burn fossil fuels, either in your car or in your gas furnace at home, wherever, what the fuel is basically hydrocarbons. So the carbon combines with the oxygen to become carbon dioxide gas. Unfortunately, our eye cannot see gases, so we don't see this pollutant coming out of our tailpipe. Once you release it, about half of it stays for centuries and 20% stays for 1,000 years. So it's a long, long-lived gas, so it surrounds the entire planet like a blanket, okay? So how does a blanket keep you warm on a cold winter night? It traps your body heat, that's all. It doesn't give you any heat, it just traps your body heat from escaping. Same way, once you cover the planet with this blanket, it traps the planet's heat and inhibits it from escaping to space. So don't let the blanket analogy fool you. The weight of the blanket, what we have put so far, it's up in the air, is 1,200 billion tons, or 1.2 trillion tons. So keep that in mind. And we have to take some of it out. So that's all I'm going to say about the science. And just to give you a personal history, when did my climate mitigation journey begin? As the distinguished guest who introduced me, 1975, I published a study showing the CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, used as refrigerants and propellants. Once you release them, they trap 10,000 times more heat than CO2. So they are a real super pollutant. But they were also impacting the ozone layer. So because of the impact on the ozone layer and the appearance of the ozone hole, the whole world adopted this Montreal Protocol to ban CFCs. Had we not banned the CFCs because of the impact on the ozone layer, it's been estimated the warming of the planet would be at least half to 1 degree more than what it is. So we would have already passed this catastrophic 2 degrees, 2.5 degrees by now. So that's an important positive. So the world knows how to do this. The world knows how to bend the curve, and the world has bent that curve successfully. But unfortunately, the Montreal Protocol did it for ozone, so they replaced it with another compound, HFCs, which are also super pollutant climate-wise. So we helped US government and other governments pass the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol in 2016 to phase out HFCs. So I would just want to start with that amazing success story all of us have had in regulating the pollution. So when did my resilience journey begin? That began at the Vatican in 2004 when Pope John Paul II, he is now saint, he admitted me to the Pontifical Academy of Science. I had been working with the church to organize a series of meetings. This one was a summit of mayors and governors. I helped the Holy Father, Pope Francis, organize, and you can see our governor, Jerry Brown, signature on the right-hand side. So let me just give you a very brief data point on why I claim the warming curve is going up and up and up. Last year, 2023, all of us experienced the hottest climate any human being has experienced. Now in the past, okay? And you can see on the right-hand side, don't worry about following it. It just shows the last 25 years data. And the red curve is last year's data. And you see the warming just exceeded out of the world. On the right-hand side is the Canadian fires. Just went sky high. And the Antarctic sea ice retreated the most it has ever retreated. So many things are happening. About 2,000 jurisdictions in 34 countries have already declared last year, recognized a climate emergency. So what's the future holding for us? We predicted in 2018, 6 years ago, the global warming is going to exceed the major threshold of 1.5 degrees. See that red curve. by 2030. At that time, United Nations was still predicting that it's not going to happen till 2040. This year they revised. They said it'll happen early 2030s. So the whole planet, all of us here, will cross the major threshold in global warming, 1.5 degrees. So that's already in the bank. So we have to prepare for it. Okay, no matter what we do, how much do we bend the curve, that is going to cross the 1.5 degrees. I consider that the climate crisis will move into everyone's living room like COVID did. And the positive side, I'm hoping we will get our Montreal moment in 2030. Why am I claiming that? The Montreal Protocol was passed not just because of the science, but nature showed, revealed through the Antarctic ozone hole. That is the equivalent of what I think when the planet crosses 1.5 degrees. So we have about 6 to 10 years to prepare ourselves, okay? And what are the ripple effects of this warming? It's just not temperature change. It changes the pollution, increased cost of living, physical health, conflicts over resources, mental health, heat stress, etc., etc., etc. Just see what has happened in the last 40 years. The disasters, there have been 11,800 disasters, natural disasters, mostly weather-related. We lost $4.3 trillion. More than all of this, just in the last 5 years, 43 million children have been displaced, okay? And this was an estimate by a famous think tank that if we let the warming go unchecked till about 2050, the loss for the planet will be a staggering $178 trillion. So we just can't afford to not solve this problem. So what do I call climate resilience? We call it MAST for mitigation, adaptation, that's the A, and societal transformation, ST, so MAST. So our resilience building has to be built on 3 pillars. Mitigation, that's what you all are doing. That's still essential. You need to mitigate to reduce the climate shocks, to reduce the climate risks to the manageable level. And once you have it at the manageable level, then you need to adapt to that, to reduce the impact. So you reduce the risks to survive, and then you reduce the impacts, partly to survive and then thrive afterwards. That thriving comes from societal transformation to a sustainable way of living. We just have to make some drastic changes to the way we live. So those are the 3-pillar mass strategy. And we're not starting from scratch. I've been working on this for the last 5 years. We held a summit of experts, not politicians, not policymakers, just experts. And we brought out this book. And look at the second chapter there. It's His Holiness Pope Francis himself. Imagine having him as a co-author. He super strongly subscribes to this whole notion of resilience. Okay? So it's both interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary. And I'll briefly mention to you what I mean by cross-disciplinary. Okay? On the mitigation, I'm not going to dwell on it. Hundreds of thousands of people are working on this, okay, to bring the pollutants down. Many of the focus is carbon dioxide, but 40% of the heating come from these other pollutants. I call it short-lived climate pollutants. Just bending their emissions alone would cut down the rate of warming by a factor of 2 in the next 25 years. And of course, we need to decarbonize the economy. And remember the 1,200 billion tons of carbon dioxide, we've got to take at least 300 billions out, okay? And there is very good news, silver linings. Okay, all I'm going to do is silver linings because there are still issues there. Just look at the statistics. 1 in 5 cars sold now is electric. We are spending $1 billion a day globally on solar deployment. Fossil fuel investment is about $1 trillion. In renewables, it adds up to 1.6. This is my prediction. From 2025, from next year onwards to 5 years before the 1.5 degree warming hits us, I think we will witness the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. But that's just a hope. If you look at the reality, I put it red, the share of coal, oil, and natural gas in global energy supply is stuck for decades around 80%, in spite of all the efforts we are taking. So we have an uphill battle. So the adaptation is number of things. I just put in few. First, we need to figure out a way to protect the public against heat stress, floods, and droughts. I clearly see in California, in the agricultural fields, men and women working. We just cannot have them work during the 11 to 3 p.m. It's going to be too hot. So we need to change the work hours at that level. Physical and mental health services, it's a huge, huge issue. You just imagine losing your home to fire, what it's going to do to your mental health. We need to climate-proof the infrastructure. That is one of the biggest problems. And energy access for the poor. I'll talk to you about the poor, water and food security, etc. Fortunately, you can ask, why should we put all this money into adaptation we need it for mitigation? This was a report released by Ban Ki-moon, Bill Gates, and 20 other leaders like them around the world. They estimated investing $1.8 trillion globally in 5 areas adaptation from 2020 to 2030 could generate $7 trillion in total net benefits. These include jobs, income, etc., etc., etc. So it's not a losing proposition to take some of our funds and invest it in adaptation. And the pillar 3 is societal transformation. We still don't have the public support we need, either in America or outside, to take the sort of actions we need, investment we need, manpower and woman power we need, okay? So we need to educate and empower climate champions, stewards, and warriors. My own target is at least 1 million climate warriors are needed to be educated. And we need to team up with faith leaders like the church, the Jewish synagogue, mosques, temples, of all faiths. We need to unpack climate change from all the issues which has divided America and slowly the rest of the world. And this is the transformation. We need to change from short-term thinking to long-term co-benefits. And we need to make sure our ecosystem also survives and thrives with us. And that depends on numerous nature-based solutions. They are very cost-effective, easily implementable, and would bring huge rewards to the poor rural inhabitants of the planet. One thing I want to leave the thought to you is that there is no one common solution. It almost depends on the individual level. But if you want to break it down, I think of the world as 3 worlds. The top 1 billion, okay, they emit almost 50% of the pollution. But they also have the resources to solve the problem. Then the middle 4 billion, 45%. Then comes the bottom 3 billion, 40%. That woman I see, I was her guest and her family in the Himalayan region. She was living in a small hut. That's the energy they have to make basic needs, burn wood. We've got to give them clean energy, accessible, almost free if they can't afford it. just for the selfish reason of protecting our forests, okay? But also they could become the important workforce. So they need to adapt, and we, the top one, really need to mitigate. And the middle 4 billion, we have to bring them in through societal transformation. So what is it I'm doing personally? It is clear we need to bring in the mayors and governors into these discussions because they are on the front lines of fighting climate change. So we selected hotspots around the world and we selected exemplars. And we are convening a meeting, a summit on May 15th to 17th. And Pope Francis himself, his health permitting, would preside over the day when the mayors and governors are there, okay? And I'm thinking this is not a one-off moment. This will be followed by regional summits. From the US, I'm super happy to let you know, California Governor Newsom, New York Governor Hochul, and Massachusetts Governor Healy, they're all attending the summit. What we are thinking is that what we want to do is to bring out what I call planetary protocol for climate change resilience, just like the Montreal Protocol, okay? If we started from ground up, as opposed to starting from top down, by the time the 1.5 degrees hits us in 6 years from now, according to my prediction, the world will be ready to sign the protocol. And so the first is the May 2024. Then this year we are planning sub-regional summits, one in New England. I'm showing you a dinner meeting where the governor of Massachusetts is on the other side of the table from me, and the mayor of Boston. They both committed to this. In California, I just received a huge funding to do the summit. When I say huge, just to hold the summit, from a wealthy donor in Santa Barbara. So we're going to hold this in September with all the mayors. We are planning something similar in India, but it's a 24-hour planet symphony, music, science together. And this is the California one. And it's going to be a confluence of community leaders, researchers, mayors, philanthropists, and entrepreneurs. We are still looking for funding for the Delhi summit, but at the California, we have most of the funds we need. And in the protocol, it's just not coming out of the blue. A team of us, including several Nobel laureates from the Pontifical Academy, we released the statement at the COP28. So we say we call for a protocol for climate resilience, signed by all nations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So that's the start. We are in the process of drafting that protocol with several leading thinkers, policymakers around the world. So what is the essence of that? Okay? So we want to bend the curve to survive and rebound to thrive. Public health is on the top of our agenda. I think we need to change our narrative to putting public health. That was the only reason, at least in America, all the major environmental regulations were taken, whether you look at air pollution laws, CFCs, DDT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you see that I put the climate justice, because that's 3 billion people whose total emissions is less than 10%. They suffer 75% of the losses. Who is responsible for when they lose their homes to floods? Okay, huge issue. Climate literacy, and then comes to the thriving part, sustainable community development, climate actions policy, climate resilient economy, etc. Okay, so that's our broad theme, umbrella we're going to use to draft the protocol. So let me conclude with two thoughts I have. I asked my granddaughter, she just turned 16 last week, in a high school in Los Angeles, to produce something to reflect climate change. And she came up with this photograph You see the fires behind the rows. So we're going to survive through that and thrive in a planet full of roses. So that's the vision and the dream. And I want to tell you, there's about 15 years to bend the curve, adapt, bounce back or rebound, transform, and keep the American dream alive. And look at what the children are telling you. There is still time to protect us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramanathan, for that very insightful, inspiring perspective on where the world stands today and the hope that does lie before us. That's the path we all have to accomplish. And thank you for your time. We know that you've got to go, but again, much appreciated. Please give Dr. Ramanathan another round of applause.